the most expensive prison in America. It was 1829, and the most expensive public building in the United States wasn't a capitol or courthouse, it was a prison. But this wasn't just any prison. With its towering stone walls, vaulted ceilings, and a radial floor plan that resembled the wings of a Gothic cathedral, it looked more like a monastery than a penitentiary. Welcome to Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, where sunlight pierced silence, where solitude was law, and where modern architecture, unexpectedly, found its dark muse. Hospitals, schools, even shopping malls, many of today's most pervasive building types carry the DNA of this 19th century prison. And it gets stranger. Foucault obsessed over it. Le Corbusier admired it. Every corridor, every watchtower was a blueprint for power, control, and utopia. Let's unlock the blueprint behind the prison that quietly shaped the modern world. The Great American Experiment. In the early 1800s, America was young and idealistic. Reformers believed in the power of architecture to heal the soul. Punishment wasn't enough. The body had to be reshaped by space. Enter the Quakers of Pennsylvania. They believed solitude led to salvation and designed a prison where inmates lived in absolute isolation, in cells lit by a single skylight, meant to symbolize the eye of God. No windows, no visitors. Food passed through a slot to avoid eye contact. Some prisoners wore hoods when moved, never to see another face. This was the Pennsylvania system. Its church-like architecture wasn't a metaphor. It was a tool, weaponized to reform or break the human spirit. The architecture of control. Eastern State's design was unlike anything the world had seen. A central surveillance tower with 7 wings radiating outward like a sunburst. From that tower, a single guard could see down every corridor without ever being seen himself. It was efficiency and omnipresence on stone, brick, and steel. A real-life panopticon before the word entered popular consciousness. This radial plan was revolutionary, not just for prisons, but for how institutions managed people. Schools, hospitals, lunatic asylums. The idea spread like wildfire across Europe. Napoleon built one in France, the Tsar in Russia. More than 300 prisons across 4 continents copied it verbatim, but not everyone saw progress. The philosophy of a cage. In 1975, French philosopher Michel Foucault published Discipline and Punish. In it, he devoted pages to the Eastern State Penitentiary. To him, it wasn't just a prison, it was a metaphor for modern society, a machinery of observation, normalization, and control. Foucault argued that places like this didn't disappear, they evolved into classrooms, cubicles, ICU wings. Shopping centers are monitored by endless security cameras. Wherever people moved in herds, someone was usually watching. Le Corbusier's visit. In 1911, a young architect named Charles-Édouard Jeanneret, later known as Le Corbusier, visited the Eastern State. Decades later, he'd quoted in his treatises, not because it was oppressive, but because it was pure. He admired its stark geometry, its symmetry, its unwavering logic. He saw in it something elemental, the ability of architecture to reshape human behavior, which begs the question, was this a prison or a prototype? From solitary cells to shopping malls, fast forward to the 20th century. When Victor Gruen designed the first enclosed shopping mall, he used a radial plan with a central atrium like Eastern State's watchtower and corridors radiating outward. At first glance, freedom, but look again, predictable circulation, controlled visibility, behavioral nudging through spatial flow. Modern hospitals? Same thing. Nurses' stations act as panoptic centers, monitoring dozens of rooms from a fixed point. And schools? Well, if you grew up walking single file down fluorescent corridors under the eye of hall monitors, now you know who to thank. Eastern State's ghost lives on, not in form, but in function. The inmates break first, but every blueprint has a fault line. By the late 1800s, reports of psychological torment mounted. Inmates were going mad. The silence was unbearable. One prisoner beat his head until his skull cracked. America began backing away from the Eastern States' rigid isolation model. The world watched and adjusted. Europe kept the design, but started changing the philosophy. Eventually, even the Eastern State broke down its internal walls. converting solitary cells into group housing. The architecture remained, but the dream that built it cracked. A haunting legacy. Today, the Eastern State is a ruin. Vines creep through the cell blocks, rust coats the watchtower, and thousands of tourists walk those hushed, haunted hallways each year. It looks like the past, but it isn't. Because what the Eastern State pioneered wasn't just prison architecture, it was a way of organizing society. Watchful, symmetrical, optimized for control. And now, much of the world is built that way. But here's the twist. Who built your world? We often think of great architecture as freeing open floor plans, cathedral light, and modular space. But what if the real architectural revolution was the quiet institutionalization of human behavior? A 19th century prison fueled by idealism, built with precision and cloaked in moral intent, ended up inspiring the very systems we live in today. So the next time you scan a hospital hallway, wait in a classroom, or lose yourself in a labyrinth of mall corridors, ask yourself, was this place designed to serve you or to observe you? Eastern State Penitentiary is a ruin now, but it's a blueprint, alive everywhere. And that is the masterpiece we never meant to build.